You know that odd feeling when you get mugged? Maybe somebody breaks into your house, your car, you're like, man, that's not great.
Very, very normal New York experience.
It's true. That's happened to me multiple times, both for those things. I had a motorcycle stolen and someone's broken into my house on separate occasions. But they find the guy. They arrest him. You go through the whole process. He gets arraigned, has his day in court, goes to jail, goes to prison. You think, wow, justice has been served. I feel good. But you go take a tour of that prison and you assume maybe he's breaking rocks. Maybe he's in the courtyard, you know, being surrounded by people of the opposite ethnicity to him, and it's like a dangerous situation. But no, he's just sitting there with a VR headset on his head and a smile on his face. What's the situation there, Shelby?
Okay, first of all, mugging is a little bit of an understatement. We're talking about people mostly in solitary confinement and or people who have had extended prison sentences, in many cases of multiple decades, okay? Mm-hmm. So the program that everyone has been seeing in headlines about this is actually in California. The organization is called Creative Acts. They launched this program in 2018. Basically what is happening is they're trying to use VR as a rehabilitation tool and a tool to help people who have been away from society for, in some cases, many decades to kind of reintegrate. So the way they do this is, on one hand, there is a little bit of the escapism, right? If you're seeing images of going on a world travel or, you know, something that lifts you up, right? Something inspiring. They say that, A, that gives you the kind of renewed hope, right? That there is life out there. You know, if you better yourself, you do your time, you make some changes, right? And then when you get out, there's something out there that is worth trying to pursue, right? So it's a little bit inspiring. On the other hand, they're also using this as a tool to help, again, reintegrate people into society, but also keep them out of prison once they're released, right? That's a major problem, especially in certain cities, right? I think Chicago is a 50%, or maybe it's Colorado, right? A 50% rate where once someone is released, they end up back in prison in a very short time. Yes. So here's the thing with that. They say that by doing this kind of reintegration therapy, if you will, and what that entails is like, you know, you go through a training module where you are taught how to use a smartphone, or you're taught how to go check out, you know, use a self-checkout at a grocery store, something that if you were locked up in, you know, a couple decades ago, you may never have experienced, right? So the method is to teach people how to become one with society again. And the other thing is, a lot of them are doing this as job training, right? So again, with the whole not wanting to bring, to want to give people a second chance, how do you do that? Well, you leave prison, you walk out the front gate for the first time in 30, 40 years, what do, right? If you have no job prospects, the world is cruel, people may not want to, people may be a bit more reluctant to give someone with a rap sheet, if you will, a second chance, especially in lucrative fields, right? So if someone is able to leave prison with a job certification for a, you know, stand-up industry, a lot of these have to do with construction work, some have to do with warehouse management, others have to do with repairing and, you know, car maintenance, the automotive industry, this kind of thing. If you can put someone through a training module while they're still incarcerated, and then they come out with either a full certification or are ready to get their certification, they can get that job, and then, you know, they're having that stable income, and then they're much less likely to be back on the street, if you will.
So this is like in that movie The Matrix, where Neo, they put the disc in and they teach him like kung fu. Is that how this works?
Are they pre-installed with just the things that they would need to like learn how to live a good life outside the clink? Or can they like put GTA on that thing and start, you know, running over drug dealers?
No, these are specified programs. Okay, so we'll go back to the one in California, right? It's actually, the way it works is it's a 7-day intensive program. So you have selected,
intensive program.
That is what they call it, right? So these people are brought into these phone booths, as they call them. They are secured in the phone booth, and they put on their VR headset for about 4 hours. During that time, they get a healthy dose of escapism, they get some inspiring kind of prompts. Some of them actually come away from these exercises, like they work in tandem with kind of poetry, art, other kind of like therapeutic efforts, right? So you go and you have your VR session, and then you come away with it and you're given artistic prompts. Like one that really stuck out to me was this California program. So they gave participants a mask, right, after going through this VR session. And they told the person to, on the outside, paint the mask the way they think the world perceives them, right? But then on the inside, they were directed to paint it with how they perceive themselves, okay? So, and the one that stuck out to me was one inmate, right, who went through this program, painted the outside of his mask as though it was full of cracks. And it had the word condemned across the forehead, right? So that's how he believes society views him, right? So that's someone who has no hope. Even if they were to be released, what are they going to do with their life, right? But on the inside, they painted a sunset, right? So something inspiring. That, what does that say about human nature?
What was he in prison for? Triple homicide?
Yeah, something like that. It's always.
Well, I mean, listening to it, you describe it, like, I agree that it's a good idea, because my initial reaction, just seeing the images of the inmates sitting there, I feel like it's not fair, because if somebody really, let's say like they kill your sister or something like that, and they're in prison, first of all, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, they shouldn't be in prison, they should be killed. I'm a big proponent of that type of punishment. But if they're in prison, you at least hope they're like breaking rocks for the rest of their life. You really hope they're getting the punishment that they deserve. But I guess what you're saying is these are people who have served long-term sentences and they're about to get released, and it's better for them and for society that they don't just go back to their old ways, and then there's some kind of like onboarding platform for them to enter society, and that's better for society. And that I agree with.
And here's the thing on that too, we're talking about, in a lot of cases, these people are very different. If you actually watch some of the interviews from some of these participants, these are guys that are hardened criminals, yes, and they are being punished for a reason, right? However, they got locked up in some cases at 16, right? As a 40-year-old, think about your younger self, right? You're a very different person in these two forms. So the argument here is, okay, perhaps for those people, and a quick side note here, this program is only eligible to inmates that are write-up free, right? So they're not just pulling anybody out of Gen Pop or, the worst of the worst to put them through this program. What they're doing is they're taking people who have established a pattern of good behavior and then allowing them to take part in something that may further their contribution to society if and when they are released.
Okay, so you're saying if our friend here went through this program, on the front it would say condemned, but on the inside it would say anarcho-capitalist, right? Because he would go back to his 16-year-old self. So again, and even besides the job training, you said like some uplifting stuff. I can also imagine like if you really grew up in some like slum or in some really bad situation, you have a bad family environment. At the age of 16, you committed like some terrible crime. You've been in prison for 30 years. Maybe like showing you some trip, like, that there is like, the Taj Mahal, or there's some beautiful canyon in the Philippines. It does show you like, wow, actually there's more to life than my home in Detroit and this prison that I've been in for the last 30 years. Maybe there's something to aspire to. So, I mean, I feel like it's a good system. Has there been any study showing, or is it too early to have a study showing whether the people who got out of prison, having gone through this VR program, do they do better than those who haven't?
There have been studies. It's still a little bit preliminary, but one quick point on that. So the concept of, the rehabilitation aspect of this, what you mentioned exactly is the foundation of this whole creative acts idea, right? Is that part of it is to heal trauma, in addition to just rehabilitate, reintegrate into society. It's also, help people grow from the experience, not just repeat the same cycle over and over. And a quick side note on this too, I was watching this really interesting short documentary on Netflix about this. It's not just VR, like there are so many examples of proven methods that help people to kind of regain some of their humanity. Like again, this documentary I mentioned, it's actually about these hardened criminals that are, suffering, they are going through life sentences at the moment, right? And what they're doing is these people with good behavior, they're brought into a room and they're taught how to make quilts for foster kids throughout the state. So they spend every day, Monday through Friday, I believe it's 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. They come into this studio, if you will, and they make quilts for kids, right? To help improve their lives. And then you hear these interviews with these people, and these are guys that are away for murder, and they're talking about how they love to make quilts for girls and boys with butterflies and stars on them because it reminds them of their parents or it reminds them of their nephew or niece, right? These are things that are genuinely helping people. And then the other main comment that I heard from these interviews was, when you're out in the atmosphere in prison, it's like you have your persona, right? Your don't mess with me persona. But then when you go into this space where you can be a person again, just for a little while, right? It's like they say their entire demeanor changes, and it's an opportunity to grow as a human, right? Back to your point on the study, though, there is a really, really major stat that I just kind of think is unbelievable. This is still very preliminary, but one of the prisons that started using this program in California, they went from 735 inmate infractions, right, down to 1 after just 1 single week of this VR experience, right? And then other studies are saying that there's a 96% drop in that kind of reported bad behavior, if you will.
But while they're in the program, if they commit any bad behaviors, they can't get their VR headset?
I don't know about the VR, but I will tell you that quilting program I mentioned, that is a requirement. If they get written up in any kind of way, then they're out.
All right, Tiffany, question. If you, or not you obviously, but someone you know got murdered, and then you find that murderer is, getting interviewed and he's talking about how much he enjoys quilting in prison, would you feel, like, what would your feeling be? Do you feel like justice is being done? And would you feel happy that at the very least he's kind of getting some reform? Or would you feel like it's not fair?
I think it depends on different scenarios. Because some, it's like, if this is, say, a serial killer and a lot of people are like, they're not going to change, then you're like, why are you giving them another chance? Or like the recent case with Brian Koberger, the one who just killed or murdered 4 Idaho college students. At his trial, he got basically a plea deal. So now he faces 4 consecutive life sentences. And the parents of the victims were like, hold up, we weren't told about this. Like, we don't agree. Like, that's my daughter, my son that was murdered. What do you mean he can just strike a deal basically behind our backs? So I think it depends on each scenario, right? It's like in some cases, you're like, okay, what were the circumstances? Was it like some of these cases where they're in a situation, maybe they don't know better and something happened? Was it more of an accident, or was there that premeditated intent? I think it depends on the scenario. But if it is like your best friend that was murdered, then you're like, hey, I want to see justice, right? So I do think there's different scenarios where I've seen some other ones, not VR ones, but some older scenarios where some jails have like a physical store basically, and inmates learn different roles so that in the future, if they do well, they have a good track record and they are reintegrated in society, they have some hands-on experience.
Removed from the commissary.
There's another one that will give them pet cats to take care of. But obviously they've checked them first to make sure they don't have a history of animal abuse. And these are hardened criminals, but they're like, if I do something bad, my cat gets taken away. So there are those cases where there is that inner human nature that can be found. And there are some where psychologists are like, you better keep that person locked up.
All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on. But we set it up so these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,